So, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple of things. We had an error in terms of our content development. They thought we were just doing the new COVID drug, and they got a little bit theatrical in terms of saying, "Well, are we ending the pandemic?" I'm not going there today. Just a couple of quick slides on a new drug that is exciting. But the major part of the video today will be about bright line eating, addiction science as applied to food. As usual, just a couple of quick comments about the other content that we have available. You know, the things that are really killing most of us, even in the COVID epidemic, it was more folks that had diabetes, cardiovascular inflammation. And, you know, your typical doctor just does not understand that. The science is really clear. Docs typically don't understand how to diagnose prediabetes, let alone manage it. So the places where you tend to have that gap in care, we've developed some content around that space. Another place where you have a gap in care is webinar. Plaque. How to assess plaque, how to understand it. You know, the typical thing in the past has been, well, hey, doc, how about if I go get a stress test? Well, that's not the right thing to do. And in fact, stress tests have plummeted over the past couple of years. You might think it's because of COVID. You know what? My son works in a grocery store, and the grocery stores haven't stopped selling groceries. They saw that as essential work. If stress tests were really required to diagnose risk for heart attack, that would be life-saving work. That would be at least as important as groceries. But what happened was the science has become clearer and clearer. Stress tests do not predict heart attack. So that kind of information, cardiovascular inflammation, prediabetes and diabetes and how to diagnose it and what to do about it, plaque evaluation, all of those are things that we cover in several different ways. Obviously, I can't see everybody. And we are getting close to slowing down on our panels. They're still open for now, but as we begin to open up things in the Alabama projects, we're probably going to be decreasing the amount of people that we can see. We clearly are going to be decreasing the amount of people that we can see from the YouTube channel. But there's still a major opportunity in terms of understanding where you may be getting gaps in care, and that is with our webinar series or our courses. With just an hour or two, you can find out a lot more than your typical doc knows about plaque evaluation, insulin resistance, prediabetes, cardiovascular inflammation, and how to evaluate those and manage those in yourself. Because heart attack's the number one cause of death, stroke's the number one cause of long-term disability. Alzheimer's is growing quickly in terms of that, of both causes of death and causes of disability. All three of those things are driven mostly by prediabetes and diabetes. And guess what? You know, we talked about, we're just getting through a COVID pandemic, coronavirus pandemic. Coronavirus is just a virus. The difference between COVID and coronavirus and death and coronavirus is usually diabetes and age. So these are the things that we talk about on this channel. We've got a book coming out. I'm not going to spend any time on that right now. Actually, we've got a couple of books coming out. We'll talk about those later. So let's get to the first topic. The new COVID drug, EXO-CD24. That's the promising new drug. It's been trialed, gone through first level trials in Tel Aviv at the prevention division at Sourasky Medical Center. The research leader was Professor Nadir Arber. Phase 1 trial was performed. 30 patients with serious COVID-19 condition participated in the trial. All of them recovered. Most of them, as in 29 out of the 30, in less than a week. It was administered to patients with severe disease. So this is not just somebody who caught the virus. This was someone who already had severe disease. They knew they were going to need to put this person on a ventilator, and they went ahead and gave them the medication. The treatment's administered on time to interrupt the aggressive immune response, this cytokine storm. You've heard it many times before it damaged the lung tissue. It's given by inhalation, 2 to 3 minutes per day for 5 days. On the safety check, they've not seen any side effects so far. Now, is this something to celebrate and to put titles out that say, are we ending the pandemic? It was maybe a little bit premature, but there's a lot of promise with this drug. And here are the next steps. Phase 2, there are Greek hospitals joining in the clinical trials. They'll be looking specifically in phase 2 at what are the minimal effective doses. And again, as always, with all phases, looking to see, are there any, what are the side effects? Almost everything has side effects. What are the side effects for this one? It certainly hasn't popped up yet. Phase 3 will be international, ultimate international multi-center studies, trials of EXO CD24 versus placebo. That's, randomized clinical trial. Hopefully it'll be effective and able to produce we'll be able to produce it in a fast, effective, efficient, and inexpensive way. And this may be actually used as a platform for other diseases which are characterized by immune system overreaction, the cytokine storm, other immune related diseases. So that's the 2 slides on the new COVID drug. Now, the major part of the program today, as I said, is not so much on that COVID drug. It's on a new type of diet. I had a colleague call me earlier this week. She said she wanted to be seen. And she said, you know what? I finally got my weight to where I want it to be, and it's stable. That's a big issue for how many people? Most of us in America. And it's not just America anymore. It's throughout the world. This is a giant and growing health problem. And I asked her, I said, I knew that you'd had challenges in this space. I didn't know how big the challenges were. I didn't know what all you'd done, but tell me what you did now to get there. And she said, bright line eating. So I looked it up, and as she said, it was the thing that interested her was it was application of addiction science to food. It's very interesting to me because I come from a family. This is my mom and dad over here on the picture on the right. My dad had lost significant weight before that picture. My dad was about 350 pounds at the time I was conceived. That in and of itself, and 5'10", my height. I weigh 160, so he was more than twice me. And that alone puts a target on my chest in terms of this health problem. It's an epidemiology issue. It's been found that in mammals, if the father is obese at the time of insemination, you greatly increase the offspring's risk for prediabetes and diabetes when they get my age, 60. But that's not really my own my only issue. I also have other epigenetics issues. Genetics, I think, is obvious. Epi means it's not so much changing the code, it's changing how your genetic code is manipulated, the librarian for all of these genes. And again, having an obese father has a epigenetic risk factor for what I've got, prediabetes and diabetes. Having a mother who was developed diabetes of gestation. In other words, diabetes of pregnancy at the time they were pregnant. If you were the child that was in the fetus, I mean, the child in the womb, the fetus in the womb at the time that your mother developed prediabetes and diabetes of pregnancy, also another major risk factor. A third thing related to the second one is if you're born over 8.5 pounds. For humans, any ounce over 8.5 pounds is greatly increasing your epigenetic risk for prediabetes and diabetes as we age. We didn't know that 63 years ago when I was born. We just thought that was a fat, happy baby. I was not 8.5 pounds. I was 10.5 pounds. So I had a couple of strikes coming out of the womb. And then, I think the biggest issue really doesn't have so much to do with that, just the pure biology. The biggest issue is behavior. It's addictions. So I've always felt, and dealing with patients in this issue, as well as just dealing with myself, it's like, how do you deal with the addiction side of it? I know that at 165, I'm about 30 pounds less than I was in college. My first year in college, it was not the freshman 5 or the freshman 10, it was the freshman 30. I was working out a lot. I played soccer that year, but I was gaining some fat too. I was living with my grandmother, who helped create a lot of this bad language, bad behavior, bad set of rules about food. And I was studying organic chemistry. So I was doing a lot of that during 3 months of that period, during the summer between freshman and the next year of college. And that's when I gained most of my weight. My blood pressure actually started going up. I reached 130/90 as, again, a freshman in college. So at that point, I got serious about weight loss, started doing a lot of long distance running. And I went low fat at that time. I remained low fat until my early to mid 50s, and then switched from low fat, high carb to the opposite, low carb, high fat, because I developed my own. It became clear I could not metabolize carbs like most of us, especially as we get into middle-aged and older. So back to this book, I'm going to cover a couple of things about this book. One is that the numbers that this group is obtaining in terms of weight loss, both rapid and steady weight loss. One of their points is people say, no, you don't want to have rapid weight loss. Their perspective is you want to change your food habits. And if you go from a really, really bad set of food habits and food rules to a good set, sometimes that's going to result in some fairly rapid weight loss. The other statistic that you see with this group that's really good is their ability to maintain the desired weight, the goal weight. Now, the person that wrote this book, Susan Pierce Thompson, has a PhD in addiction science. She spends a lot of time talking about dopamine and impact of things like sugar on our nucleus accumbens, part of the nucleus involved in the addiction to food. So let's talk a little bit more about those specific items. She talks about bright lines. We'll talk about those. Well, let's just go ahead and talk about those right now. One of the basic concepts and where this comes from is some studies done around decision-making processes. So some of the research done with this was where they texted people just at random, a few hundred people, 4 or 5 times a day for a few weeks. And they just ask them, what are they working on? What are they thinking about? What issues are they dealing with right now? 40% of the time, these people were not selected because of dietary issues. These people were selected at random, and 40% of the time they mentioned, yeah, I'm thinking about eating. So the point was, there's, or I'm trying not to eat. The point was, when you have fuzzy rules around food, you spend a lot of time justifying to yourself, trying to say, okay, what should I do right now? Should I eat? Should I not eat? Should I wait till, it's like, should I go get a snack before I do the YouTube live today? And if so, what am I going to get? And now I've been there. I've done a lot of that type of discussion. So then she goes on to talk about the Saboteur. And we'll talk about the Saboteur in just a minute. Now, she starts with 4 very, very bright lines. And those lines are very interesting. The bright line rules. First, no sugar. And she, again, goes into discussions about the impact of sugar on the nucleus accumbens. No flour. Again, dopamine in the nucleus accumbens. And her point, she actually goes to on to describe and compare sugar and flour to cocaine, and heroin. Her point was that, what, with each of these items, they all came from plants. It's not a plant problem. She is primarily plant-based in her own diet. But it's the problem of boiling down the essence of a characteristic of a certain plant. So with heroin, it's a chemical coming out of the poppy seed. With cocaine, it's a chemical coming out of coca leaves. We flew down to, we went to Peru a couple of years ago, and in the, I'm trying to remember the name of the town where we went. I went to do the hike up to Machu Picchu. And when you fly to the airport there, they have a little bowl with some sort of dried up looking leaves in the bowl. Those are actually coca leaves. They're not controlled. You might think they are until you get there. And coca leaves in and of themselves are not addictive. But the white powder that is distilled out of those coca leaves is very addictive. We all know the story on that. So I was telling this story to my son, and he chuckled, and we were talking about, wow, wonder if there'll ever be an award-winning series like Breaking Bad about sugar or flour. It makes he raised it as a joke, but then I started to think about it. Imagine the economic impact of the white powder that has been distilled and sold out of sugarcane, out of wheat flour. Interesting point. So that's 2 of the 4 bright lines that she talks about in her application of addiction science to food. The third rule is meals only. In other words, no snacks. As you start reading, I thought I had problems with food. Wow. You start reading the book, and you start hearing about a lot of the examples. A lot of people that have major obesity problems not only snacked a lot, but they tended to snack on sugar or things that were just very flour intensive. Again, they talk about salt and fat. They say, yeah, you can add some salt or fat, some cheese to broccoli, and people will eat more broccoli that way. But they're not going to go across town at midnight to get broccoli with tons and tons of cheese on it, just like they will go to get pizza. So again, helping to underline some of the challenges associated with these different rules. use of sugar, use of flour, snacking. And then the one that's always been a challenge for me, portion control. And what they do is they actually measure stuff. I don't know that I'm ever going to get there, but I am learning a lot of interesting stuff as I read this book. I've been reading it for the past couple of nights. It made me think about how I managed my own weight as an adult. I got up, like I said, to 190, 195 when I was in college, and then have been in the 145 to 165 ever since as an adult. One of the things that I did for about 20 years, I was traveling all but 2 or 3 nights of a month. When you're traveling a lot, it's a major challenge to manage your weight. I did it with the rule that I would never eat an entree. I would eat entree salads, basically a large salad with a piece of meat, and sometimes skip the meat. If I ever started breaking that rule, I started blowing up. I didn't eat snacks. When you're traveling, you got to start organizing things. You got to start buying snacks and stuff like that. And I just didn't do that. I was very much afraid of going back to those unhealthy weights. My original rule back in college was what most of us thought was healthy at that time: no fat. So I ended up with a fairly high carb diet. In my mid 50s, I began to realize, as I said, that I was developing an inability to metabolize carbs. I got a lot deeper in terms of understanding prediabetes, diabetes. That's what led to this, to a lot of the components of this channel, and put that together with my profession, preventive medicine. And that's where you get, again, a huge component of what we do in this channel, making people aware of the disablers and killers that are impacting our lives. So I switched from no fat or low fat to low carb. And that one rule switch has been very beneficial, but it's also been a major, major challenge in terms of upsetting all the other rules. Now, one of the other things that they talk about in this book, and we'll cover it a little bit more at a later date, but they talk about the saboteur. Now, what's the saboteur? The saboteur is part of our brain. One of the things they make a point of is that we assume, and we see ourselves as an entity, a human being does. So we're not aware that levels of consciousness come from different places. Like the left hemisphere is what we do that's where our verbal rationale comes from. Our lizard brain, or our basal ganglia, the part of the brain that controls our animal, our breathing, our basic animal activities. And it's interesting how you can begin to understand this saboteur and this failure to make a difference using this kind of example. The example she gave was, say, okay, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to stop breathing. And I'm going to stop breathing for 5 minutes. And then I will see, go ahead and go through the activity of convincing yourself that you're going to do this. Now, then stop breathing. As you start to get into, for some people, 15 to 30 seconds, for some people longer, you start going through a progression of your own logic that, okay, yeah, it may have made sense earlier. I'm not so sure it makes sense now. And by the time you hit a minute or more, this is really stupid. I'm not going to do this. the point behind all of this is your brain has several different places that are all working independently. But then by the time you make a decision, that decision can be changed, and you'll not be aware of where it came from in your brain. Now, why does that make a difference? Let me give you another example. They described some research where there were a few patients, there's about a dozen of them, that had had surgery, which had caused they had split the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is this white matter that goes between the right and the left hemisphere. So what they did in the study was they showed people things in the left field of vision and the right field of vision. The right field of vision is controlled by the left brain. The left field of vision is controlled by the right brain. They showed a chicken foot in the left field of vision. They showed snowing in the right field of vision. And then they showed a snow shovel, a couple of other things. And the people in the study all picked a snow shovel. And then they asked them, okay, please explain why you picked the shovel. And the point, they linked the shovel back to the chicken, because you remember, the left hemisphere manages the verbal logic. The left hemisphere was not talking to the right hemisphere, but the right hemisphere had seen this chicken. So most of them were saying, I need the shovel to shovel the chicken crap. So an interesting point about what they call, the saboteur. And that's the person where inside of you, it may come from your lizard brain. It may come from your basal ganglia. It may come from somewhere else. But when you get tired, when you start getting a little bit hypoglycemic, when you start getting hungry, you start making a lot of excuses. Well, you know what? I'm going to start tomorrow. Oh, wait a minute. No, that was not very practical. My most common saboteur is, maybe not today. I'll start tomorrow. So that's a 101 level of bright line eating, addiction science as applied to food. So we'll go to Q&A now. So hold on, I'm getting a glitch on my computer. Well, heck with that. Here we go. Let me set this up. Bart Robinson here. My first Pfizer jab last night. I feel no side effects today, no sore arm either. Squats and jump rope routine after your presentation. So very good. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you referring to that, and I appreciate you sharing it. One of the things they did find was that people tended to have far fewer side effects if they did get some mild exercise in. Amer from Germany. How are you, Amer? Good morning. E.T. himself. Hello, E.T. How are you? Dennis, could eating 4 eggs per day negatively impact one's health? That's a great question, Dennis. I appreciate you sharing it. So there's a couple of things on that space. It's like the last plank in the vegetarians platform. You know, the vegetarian platform has taken a lot of hits with the book, like the book on saturated fat by Nina Teicholz, The Big Fat Surprise. by a lot of the new information that's come out about the other big fat surprise. Oh, I'm blanking on his name. Ansel Keys and his 7 countries study. And the fact that, you know what, he was maybe picking winners for that study based on his assumption that fat in the diet was causing fat in the arteries or plaque in the arteries. One of the last components was the egg yolks. And I'm blanking on what component it is in the egg yolk, but there was some research that was done recently. You did find some increase in a couple of things after eating egg yolks. But that ended up becoming much more of an issue really for people that had kidney disease. So the reality is, I don't think eggs are gonna hurt you. And somebody help me with the fact checking on the information I'm talking about. I did a couple of videos on it. E.T. himself, no. I agree with you, E.T. I don't think eggs are going to cause a health problem. Brothers, I don't think they have any interest in treating COVID and using meds to stop the virus. Some countries made hydroxychloroquine available to the entire population. Yeah, it's interesting to see the politics on the decisions that have been made in this space. Brothers, other countries jail doctors that prescribed it or ivermectin. Sole focus is on stats, fear, vaccine. During the vaccine, by the way, I did prescribe both hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin didn't have a lot of takers. I came on the channel and offered that. Had a few, but not a lot. A couple of ophthalmologists early on in the pandemic were seeing patients and asked me to write hydroxychloroquine for them. Steve Carter, COVID-19 is a psyop, doc. Mark Phillips, doctor, I'm using 22 milligrams zinc daily with quercetin, vitamin D, magnesium as an adjunct because of my concerns with heterogeneous FVL and factor 2. Well, Mark, you're going to have to be a little bit more specific about FVL. John Scott, is MSG really bad for you? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think I'm going to be the one to help you on that. I don't have an opinion because I haven't done the science on it. Dennis Bolanos, what is your opinion on using dexedrine for weight loss? The amphetamines have been shown to help. There are a whole lot of different amphetamine-related products available for weight loss. The question is, how long? And again, whenever we talk about weight loss and diet, I always get back to those same issues. There are biological issues, and then there are behavioral issues. I think just with a lot of people, over half the people that come to me as patients from this channel have lost over 30 pounds. And the vast majority of them did it with a couple of simple steps. The first one was that they stopped eating carbs. When they did, their blood sugar tended to level out. As their blood sugar leveled out, they tended to have better experience in terms of these hunger episodes. Hunger is a temporary thing. It will go away. But it's difficult to just manage ourselves through that hunger episode and not let the saboteur talk us into doing something that we don't want to do. So again, you can get the same thing with amphetamines. I think one of the things they tend to do is help us jump over some of that. They actually have some impact on hunger. They also obviously have an impact on our decision-making ability. So they have been shown to help in some places. The question is, how much and for how long are you going to take? Are you going to take amphetamines the rest of your life? And I think that's pretty clear that long-term use is just not that helpful. Fort Worth West Side, I gave myself a home OGTT. And, you spelled OGGT. Everybody does that, Fort Worth. Don't worry about it. But it's oral glucose tolerance test. And I'm glad to hear you doing that, because I would greatly recommend, it's such an easy way of telling, do I have the ability to healthily and effectively metabolize carbs without burning my arteries, without damaging myself? Instead of using applesauce, like you mentioned, yes, he's talking about, I did a video where I did a home OGTT using Mott's applesauce. And sure enough, it knocked my blood sugar way up there. And it was because Mott's applesauce is full of sugar. Okay, instead of using applesauce, like you mentioned, my friend had a pint of toasted coconut almond gelato. I convinced her to donate it to me in the interest of science. Well, I hope that you and your friend both felt like what you got out of it was worth that pint of gelato. Results: start 102 milligrams. Blood sugar was 102 at the beginning. In the first hour, it went up to 172. Second hour, the third test, 154. Third was 106. Fourth was 85. Couldn't check the insulin levels, of course. Likely I have some insulin resistance. Yeah, you really should do an insulin survey. And here's the thing, Fort Worth. Gelato's got a lot of fat in it. So gelato's not going to have as negative of an impact, not going to knock your blood sugar up as far and as quickly as just the more available sources of sugar. I wouldn't be surprised if you turned out to have full-blown diabetes. But, again, that's something that you really need to test. There's no question you have enough of a blood sugar problem right now, Fort Worth, to be damaging your arteries. No question at all. You've got significant risk there. I would deal with that. I would not ignore it. Do I need to really do a craft test just to make sure I stick to my keto diet? Well, see, that's the thing. Most of my patients with full-blown diabetes even still hardly ever get over a blood sugar of 120, even after meals. I was saying that the other day and somebody said, "Oh, you mean during the morning glucose?" And I said, "No, I'm talking about even after meals. Because if you're not eating carbs, your blood sugar is not going to go up." Now, to answer your question, I have to answer a question with another question. Sorry about that. But do I really need to do a craft test or to make sure, or just stay on keto? Well, it depends on what you want to find out. To me, I really want to know how bad my glucose gets, and I also want to know how much insulin I'm making. I saw two very different patients just last week. One was a 45-year-old man whose blood sugar went up over, I think it was like 230 at hour 1. And his insulin went over 230 as well. I mean, it's like huge numbers. So he was in a very, very different position from the 71-year-old that I saw a little bit later. His blood sugars were going up to 230, 240, but his insulin levels didn't get beyond 20. So that kind of information is very helpful for Fort Worth, because it lets us know, the 45-year-old obviously had a whole lot. His major problem was insulin resistance. His pancreas was not that worn out and beat up yet. He was not in he was in stage 4, whereas the 71-year-old was clearly in stage 5. And again, that's helpful information to know. Last insulin test in lab showed 8.11 last month. I'm assuming that 8.1 is fasting. And again, what we really want to know is what's going on a moving picture after you challenge it. That's a great story, Fort Worth. I appreciate you sharing that, and especially sharing the details that you've just shared. Kurt Bryant, sorry I'm late. Well, I'm sorry you're late too. You can go back and watch the beginning a little bit later. Robert Weiss, we're getting a lot of comments here, so it's starting to skip around a little bit. Robert Weiss is from the North Georgia mountains. Hello, Robert. Thank you for joining us. Diabetic retinopathy exam showed no indications of diabetes. Excellent. Congratulations. I'm glad to hear it. What information can I gather from that? Thanks. And of course, from the North Georgia mountains. And again, not North Georgia in Asia. It's not the country Georgia. It's the U.S. state Georgia, where my grandmother's family's from. I think it was Ayersville was the name of the town they were from. Anyway, Robert, what that tells you is you don't have any obvious significant small vessel damage. That's one of the major reasons for looking in people's eyes to see, okay, just how much damage do we have to the small vessels? And it can be from other things too, but obviously most commonly it's from diabetes and prediabetes. I've mentioned on my last exam, I had one drusen, which is the singular for the word drusen. You may have heard that. A drusen are little pockets of cholesterol and fat, similar to what you see in plaque in an artery wall. And that happens because with diabetes or prediabetes, because you're inflaming that artery wall, and that's causing that deposition of cholesterol. So again, Robert, congratulations. And you certainly don't have any evidence from your eyes, and that's a pretty reliable thing to see, evidence of little to no damage on your small vessels. Jetta Wilcox, have done keto for, I will say this, just one other thing, Robert. You haven't mentioned what sort of testing you've done. You haven't mentioned what sort of age you have. By the time we're age 60, well over half of us have significant prediabetes or full-blown diabetes. And I've seen this time and time again. It happens over a few-year period. So seeing your eyes and your small vessels in good shape doesn't mean that you have not started this problem. I clearly would recommend at least an OGTT, preferably a full-blown insulin survey each year, especially after age 50. Jetta Wilcox, have done keto for 3.5 years. Easiest way of life I've ever found. Every diet known to man, 70 plus years, nothing lasted long. This is my way of life now. Never felt better. 75, feel 40. Well, Jetta, congratulations, and thank you for sharing that. Eggs, the perfect food in ratio to fat and protein. It's a good point. This story about eggs reminds me of a story that I've shared once before. I was when Janice and I, very soon after we got married, we took off for Europe. To Europe, and I had just finished my internship. I had finished a year of practicing in the emergency room, and this was the time when we were on low fat, and this was at a time when everybody thought egg yolks were unhealthy, at least everybody in my business, preventive medicine. So we were staying at these youth hostels. We were in one in Germany. And I was eating the eggs, but I thought that the yolk was unhealthy at that point in time. And so what I would do is I would eat the egg, take the yolk out, put it on the side, and then eat the egg white. I asked for another one. Other kids were getting more eggs, and the lady ignored me. She walked past, and I went up and asked, and she said, she pointed to the lady in the back, and the lady in the back was looking at us. So I went to talk to the lady in the back. She said, well, you're not eating the eggs. And I said, well, No, I'm just not eating the egg yolk. I'm eating the rest of the egg. Anyhow, she felt like I was being wasteful, not eating the egg yolk. In retrospect, she very well may have been right. Bart Robinson, TMAO, yes, trimethylamine oxide. Thank you so much, Bart. Yes, trimethylamine oxide. If you look up my name and the YouTube videos, you'll find trimethylamine oxide. And one of the things that in that video, I cover a couple of good studies. I think one of them was published in the New England Journal, where they actually did radioactive tagging of TMAO and radioactive tagging of egg yolks, and they did show that yes, egg yolks were contributing to the TMAO, and that was at a time when they thought TMAO was a risk. Since then, if you look more deeply at the actual evidence around TMAO, trimethylamine oxide, it doesn't look nearly so convincing that it's a problem. If you have kidney disease, maybe it's an issue, but otherwise, probably not. And again, thank you so much, Bart. I get frustrated because, they say word finding it's one of the first things that you have when you're starting to slip into senile dementia, senility. The thing is, though, I've had word finding problems since the 4th grade. So I'm not saying that this is not the first step of the end of me getting senile. I may be getting senile. But I'm saying that that's that one item, looking for that first is probably not something that I can use simply because I've just had it my whole life. It's a verbal skills issue. Fort Worth West Side, read the I'm Aware newsletter. I like the quote they had. Genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Thank you so much, Fort Worth, and thank you for mentioning I'm Aware. I'm Aware approached me. They were... or did I approach them? You could debate and argue that either way. Well, here's what happened. I've been looking. As you can tell, we've already brought it up several times. I'm a big fan of knowing what's going on in terms of your glucose metabolism. It's so frustrating to have to go to a place like a reference lab like Quest and ask for that test. If you have never done it, good luck. It took me I do this all the time with them, and it took me 2 years to get even Quest to agree to do a complete OGTT with insulin tests at each draw. I mentioned Daniel Trevor's book, Daniel sharing some of his own story. And he was saying, Doc, why can't we tell these people how to get a Kraft insulin survey? Well, the problem is it's just difficult to get labs to do that. There's a lab called Meridian Valley that's doing it. When you try to get it from LabCorp, try to get it from Quest, it is very, very difficult. Because of my work with them, Michelle and I were able to get them to go to that it's a modified Kraft insulin protocol. So anyhow, you got me talking about I'm Aware. The bottom line is I've been wanting to get a home test, a simple, easy, effective home test for an insulin survey for years. And I'm Aware stepping up to the plate. I connected with Yanni, the CEO for I'm Aware, through David Vigorous. David has been on our channel a couple of times. He knows laboratory scientists. He was a laboratory scientist at Vanderbilt and has done a lot of work, continues to do a lot of work with in this space. And he looked at this as well. And I said, David, I've been calling you every few months asking you, is there a group that actually has the science and the technology down Um, is there another group besides Meridian Valley? Because, theirs is kind of expensive. It's a whole lot of blood, a whole lot of finger sticks. I know that we're getting more towards this micro sample, micro pipetting technology. Why isn't somebody there? And he said, I'm Aware's there. So we've been doing a lot of work with I'm Aware over the past, 6 months to get a Kraft insulin survey, or something very similar, an insulin survey that you can do easily and at home. Now we've had a lot of challenges. One of the challenges has to do with how to label the blood spot test. Another challenge has to do with the exact testing amount itself. Again, if you look at Meridian Valley, which uses similar technology, there are just issues in terms of the finger stick and things like that. But anyhow, I had a patient and an attendee of one of the webinars just a couple of days ago that did the I'm Aware test, and sure enough, full-blown diabetic. So the test is getting ready for prime time. Thank you so much, Fort Worth, for bringing it up. And I think I totally bypassed your point. Yes, in our work, I've heard it many times. I first heard it from Brad Bale and Amy Duneen. Genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. No trash in heaven. Green tea helps with hunger. It does. And guess what? Just time. Usually hunger lasts about 15 minutes, and then you go on to something else. Jetta Wilcox, The Big Fat Surprise and The Salt Fix are two great reads. You're exactly right, Jetta. Thank you for sharing. Martha Wright, good day. I told Daryl, and I believe Daryl is James's uncle Daryl, and Martha's James's aunt. Told Daryl to add 1 tea of avocado, teaspoon of avocado oil to his morning protein drink based on your recommendation. I watched him free pour in his drink. It was at about 1/4 of a cup. Well, you know what? I'm not too worried about that, Aunt Martha. If you're trying to gain weight and and you can't metabolize carbs, these oils are a great way to go. And it brings up the point where, people tend to, thank you for sharing. And it brings up the point that people tend to say, well, I'm on a plant-based diet, so I got to eat carbs. They tend to assume that somebody on a keto diet is just pigging out on bacon all the time. Not so much. I mean, not so fast. Hold on. You can go completely keto on a completely vegan diet. But you end up doing stuff like what you're describing with Daryl, Aunt Martha. You end up using a lot of the healthy vegetarian oils. Jetta Wilcox, for hunger, drink water. Eat a dill pickle, get up and do something. It goes away. Thank you, Jetta. You're exactly right. And you know what? It's that saboteur that says, oh, well, I can't get up and do something. Oh, I can't get up and eat a pickle. Oh, I can't get a drink of water. That's not going to make me feel better. Yes, it will. You just got to work through, again, some of the mental gymnastics of watching your brain lie to you. John Tocho, I took ivermectin late in the waiting process at my doctor's recommendation. Worked like magic. Vaccine became available after I took my first dose. Well, thanks for sharing. I've had several people talk to me about the vaccine. There's still a lot of mistrust of the vaccine out there. I know it's political. It's interesting that not only does this virus, but this vaccine knows which way you vote. I took the vaccine, and here's the bottom line. There are two major issues regarding the vaccine. One is a lot of people are very concerned about the messenger RNA. Well, the messenger RNA is a new type of applying vaccine. No, it isn't a genetic modification. No, it isn't going to turn us into three-eyed monsters. At least, I don't think so. I know that I can't prove that, but here's the thing. Any vaccine is going to have risk. All vaccines have had some risk. This vaccine will have some risk. But think about it. Over the next 6 to 18 months, I mean, this is a conversation my mother and I had. She's in her 90s and she elected to have the vaccine. I elected to have it. And here was the thing. We both acknowledged that over the next 6 to 18 months, we're going to get exposed to that spike virus, the outer coating of the coronavirus. And here's the question. When you get exposed to that spike protein, do you want it to be attached with with the rest of the virus? Or would you rather it be separate and alone, even if it's associated with the vaccine? I made the choice, risk or no, to have it associated, to get that spike protein alone and associated with any of the risks that went with the vaccine. So that's item number one, just the overall risk of viruses. The second one is related specifically to the mRNA mechanism. There are some out there. The J&J, I think, is the one that that's available in the U.S. that is old style vaccine. I think it may have been on an adenovirus platform, but it's an old style platform that we've been taking for decades. It's not an mRNA. And so there's a non-mRNA vaccine available as well, if you're that worried. It's interesting, about, I'd say at least 10% of my patients feel very strongly that, or have felt very strongly they didn't want to take the vaccine. Most of them was based on this assumption that there was potential genetic modification from the mRNA or potential risks that we just didn't understand yet from the mRNA. And what's weird is that most of them didn't know that we had a non-mRNA virus vaccine available. Thank you, John, for sharing all that. Fort Worth West Side. Let me add that my normal glucose levels are about 120, 16 postprandial and around 95 otherwise. Thank you so much for adding that, Fort Worth. And you're right, I'm not surprised. You mentioned you're on a keto diet. So, that gets back to the conversation. Why would somebody even want to go through all that testing? For some people, I had one patient that said, Doc, I don't know if I want to do this again, because here's why. What you told us is that we need to eat like 150 carbs a day for 2 days prior to getting the test. And I tell you, I fell off the wagon. It was a struggle for me to get back to a keto diet. And my advice to that patient was, don't do that again. We can do another OGTT, but don't do that carb prep if that's going to, to send you off the wagon, to have you, go into weeks worth of addictive behavior around sugar and around carbs. As a physician taking care of somebody, it's critical for not only me, but even more critical for them to know their exact condition. The way the standards, the way the tests have been written up, and the way that we've done it with populations does indicate, in order to be able to compare and say, okay, I've hit that 200 and beyond with my glucose, I'm full-blown diabetic. That matters to a lot of people. But again, we're weighing two different things. I'll just leave it at that. I think you know where I'm going. Martha Reich continued. His rapid weight loss has slowed, and I think it's close to stopping. He said he felt like he had more energy. He thinks it's adding good fats in the morning. Well, Martha, thank you for sharing that. I was going to mention that, but since we had talked, I as the doc, I can't bring it up. As Martha mentioned, Daryl was having some trouble losing weight. And he was also having trouble with energy. So we talked about it. We said, you know what? There's this concept. This brings up this whole issue that people think if I'm on a keto diet, I can eat 6,000 calories a day and I'm still not going to gain weight. Not true. Now, it is true that when you're eating keto and not eating carbs, you don't burn it as efficiently, burn your calories as efficiently. Now, for the most of us, that's like 20% or less. For some people, and it's less than 10% of people, it's some people burn 30% less efficiently when they're not eating any carbs. At the bottom line, though, let's say you burn 2,000 calories. That still doesn't mean you can eat 6,000 calories. The biggest impact, only 10% of us would have, is you could eat, what, 2,700 calories, a third again. So most of us, it's like 20%, in other words, 2,400 calories to maintain your weight. As Martha and Daryl and I were talking about, and as Martha is referring to here, Daryl's not the only person that has this problem. There are a lot of people that begin to wrap their head around the fact that they may have prediabetes, full-blown diabetes. Their cardiovascular system is healthier when they're not eating carbs. They're comfortable on a low carb or keto diet, but they're having trouble maintaining their weight. Add the oils, add the healthy oils in the morning, or add them whenever you can eat them. Again, that's talking about bright line eating. That's a rule that Martha says, or it sounds like Daryl may be adding back to his diet, adding a little bit of healthy fats. Martha, that was a great topic. I appreciate you bringing it up, and I really appreciate you sharing it with others, because I can tell you, as I said before, Daryl's not the only person with this problem of maintaining weight as you get older if you're on keto. Mezzanine, February blood results had a 3.2 white count. WBC, white blood cell. That's what WBC stands for. Last few years, also in the low 4s and mid 3s. I'm concerned about receiving the vaccine tomorrow. Thoughts? I'm not too concerned about low level, unless you have aplastic anemia, which means you're just not making any, to the point to where your hematologist, your immunologist has said, you shouldn't do this. You get a lot of people with relatively low numbers. And in fact, it brings up the whole point about lab interpretation. Labs typically go by two standard deviations, which usually means 5%. In other words, 1 out of 20 of your labs and 1 out of 20 labs are going to be, quote, abnormal, either abnormally high or abnormally low. Once you've begun to realize, a typical panel that I'll get of labs may have 50 or 60 different lab results. Just out of statistics, a couple of them are going to be, quote, abnormal, even in a person who's not got anything bad going on. So don't overreact to lab studies, Mezzanine. Thank you for sharing that. We've got a lot of other stuff. I'm going to start having to move quickly because we're continuing to get a lot of comments. Hamid Hajar, I'm a maxillofacial 62-year-old surgeon. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Hajar. My calcium score is 5. Wow, that's excellent. Good. Did a sort of a CIMT, very bad result. Right side 1.8 millimeter, left side 0.8 millimeter, plaque present. I have no hypertension, no insulin resistance. All markers are good. When you say did a sort of a CIMT, the problem with CIMT is that garbage in, garbage out. You have to be very meticulous to the point of being obsessive compulsive with your technique, how you actually do the ultrasound. We've got several videos that talk about that. The other thing, though, is that we know you do have plaque because you didn't have a 0 calcium score. You had a 5. So here's the other point. Do you have a significant amount of soft plaque and it's just not showing up? on the calcium score yet. So the other thing I would say is that most people that come to me with these kind of stories have really not gotten a full-blown OGTT with insulin values. In other words, an insulin profile. That's the gold standard. I would get the insulin profile. By the time, you're 62, and by the time we're 60, most of us have this problem. And that's really the underlying issue. You want to know, am I driving more plaque? You've had some before, so you know that something's driving plaque in your arteries. Laney Jet, Dr. Brewer, what lab tests would I have to have my physician order in order to find out the values that you measure for plaque, insulin resistant, port OGG, et cetera? Clearly you want, as I just mentioned, Laney, you clearly want to get an insulin survey. And as someone mentioned a few minutes ago, there are a couple of sources out there where you can get these at home now. Meridian Valley Lab's been doing them for a while. They're like 350. I think it's like $50 through I'm Aware. I'm Aware is just now getting ready for prime time. You're starting to see some of their stuff out there. That's clearly the most important tests. By the time I'm 60, I would want to get at least one calcium. I'd want to get a calcium score. I wouldn't repeat those more often than like every 5 years. I would get a good CIMT. The problem with CIMT, as I said, there's interrogation issues, technical issues, stuff like that. But CIMT is the only study that's going to show you whether you currently have soft plaque. And soft plaque is what causes the problem. If I had nothing else, and Daniel Trevor and I were talking about this in terms of his upcoming book, if I had nothing else, I would recommend an OGTT with insulin response or an insulin survey. Same thing. John Toucher, let's get those likes up, please, and thumbs up too. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate that. How many have we gotten so far? There's a place where you can see them, but I don't remember where it is. Thank you so much. As you guys know, you may not know this. This is like my third retirement. I'm getting ready to get very active again with some Medicare clinics in Alabama, prevention focused. But the whole point behind this channel is to help people understand what might be killing and disabling them that their doctor may not know about. So when you hit a like, that's free. What that does is it tells the YouTube algorithm, the artificial intelligence, hey, some humans are watching this and they think it's worth taking a look at. So it'll suggest it to other folks. Thank you again, John. Hamid Hajar, Dr. Hajar, I want to explore the theory that due to head being down for years, creating turbulence and damage to the carotid, creating these problems like dentists and surgeons. It makes sense, Dr. Hajar. I will tell you this, though. In my first 4 or 5 years of this specific kind of practice, I did a lot of work with Brad Bale and Amy Deneen. The major patient pool for these folks was dentists. There's another related reason why dentists were the major profession seen as patients for the Bale Deneen group and for myself as well. And that is, a dentist is like us, like anybody else. They get up, they go to, they get a shower, they eat breakfast, they go into work. About half of the adults that a dentist sees will have inflamed gums. The number one cause of gum inflammation is prediabetes and diabetes. So dentists are very much aware of this inflammation prediabetes issue. I will tell you this, so to your point, I cannot tell you the number of dentists that I saw that said, no, my blood sugar's okay. I've got plaque, but it's not from blood sugar. A couple of them, we did have other issues. We did have rheumatic fever. A couple of them had psoriatic arthritis. Those are also, if you have those inflammatory diseases, they can cause cardiovascular inflammation too. But Dr. Hajar, I would make sure that you got a good, get an inflammation panel, cardiovascular inflammation panel, but get that OGTT and insulin response. Fort Worth West Side, let me add that my normal glucose levels are about 120 to 126 postprandial and around 95 otherwise. Thank you so much, Fort Worth, and I'm not surprised. Netra Jadav, doctor, have you taken COVID vaccine? Yes, I did. I got it months ago. I live in Kentucky. We got Lexington, Kentucky. We had access. Medical people had access to, gosh, I think it was February or March when I was able to get mine. Although Dr. Hajar, although the CIMT, I have to repeat, have not been able to locate one in Southern California. If you call Michelle at 859-721-1414, 859-721-1414, she can, oh, thank you, Gilbert, you were listening. I appreciate that. That's the number. You can call there, and Michelle can give you the number of the folks at Cardio Risk. They do have folks doing the circuit. They have well-trained CIMT techs doing the circuit rider approach, and they have people coming through Southern California. I know I've had plenty of patients in Southern Cal. Laney Jett, thank you for all your insightful discussions. Thank you so much, Laney, and thank you guys, all of you, for putting up with my senior moments when I can't remember something like TMAO. It's like I did a whole series of videos on that. And thank you guys like Bart who helped me with that word finding. Robert Weiss, 74, OGTT, clearly diabetic. 3 hours over 350. Ooh, I had no idea, Robert. Thank you so much for sharing that. Dropped 90 pounds, now less than 50 carbs per day. Inflammation panel is low inflammation, I bet. I mean, aging drives it, but body fat drives it too. It's not, we don't think it's the leptin that fat makes, but it's some cytokines that the fat makes, helps drive insulin resistance. The inability to respond to insulin by your insulin receptors. CIMT, no plaque. Wow, that's amazing. I'm assuming at least pre-diabetic. If you had a blood sugar over 200 at any point, and you said yours was 350 at 3 hours, full-blown diabetic. And that's not that uncommon for a 70-year-old, Robert. Thank you so much for sharing it. Fort Worth, father-in-law is 92, getting vascular dementia. Family gives him all kinds of sweets. I told him that was going to make it worse. Told me when I get an MD degree, they'll consider my info. You know, I've got an MD degree. I've done it for over 30 years, and quite often I learn some of the most important stuff from patients. Zeph Survival, thanks for your info. Thank you so much, Zeph. Fort Worth, speaking of craft survey, how can I get that kit? I'd like to take that and give it to my father-in-law too, if I can convince his family. So I'm Aware is the one that I'm working with. I have, I did a couple of videos on it, and they said, that's great. We started getting a lot of people coming in, but can you take those videos down? We're not quite ready for prime time yet. As I mentioned before, you may be able to get one with I'm Aware. Again, you can call Michelle at 859-721-1414. Now, we can get a full-blown, we can get that modified Kraft insulin survey through Quest, which is a much more definitive test. And like I said before, Meridian Valley Labs has made this available through home testing for years. Fort Worth, speaking of craft survey, how can I get that now? I think we got a duplicate on that, other than the company you just talked about. So again, Meridian Valley Lab, I'm Aware, and order it through Quest Lab. If you try to get it through Quest Lab as a patient, they self-pay or self-order, they probably won't do it for you. But again, Michelle can help. Matt Aarons, I think I heard you say in one of your videos that ketones are needed for any weight loss. Did I hear that right? Even if I'm not in ketosis. Matt, that was a great point. Very impressive listening. Yes, you're right. When you burn fat, you create ketones. So it's not that you have to eat keto. I mean, you could just eat nothing and start burning fat, lose weight. You'll develop some ketones like beta hydroxybutyrate in your blood. Now, you may not pick it up. That's the thing. Most people think, oh, well, if you're keto, you're going to pick it up on, it's not Keto Monkey. What is that thing? Keto Mojo. Keto Mojo or one of the other ketone meters. That's not necessarily true. If you're burning fat, you're creating ketones. That's what I was talking about. You might not catch it on testing, but you're burning them. J&J is one shot. TD adenovirus. No. Yep. I think so. I think it's like I said, I think it's one shot adenovirus base. If you're insulin resistant, should you consider talking with your doc about taking metformin? I would. I agree with the premise of the TAME study where they're saying, look, just put it in the water once people get 65. And actually, I'd say just put it in the water once people are 60, because over half of people have that, have insulin resistance. No Trash in Heaven. Would you agree that risk is low for a metabolically healthy 60-year-old and benefit is greater to my memory cells than the vax? Well, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. If you're asking, is being metabolically healthy more important than a vaccine? Hands down. Yeah, there is. I mean, it's like that old adage that genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. There's also another adage that's just as true, and you should hear it over and over again. You should live by it, and that is, you can't out-prescribe, you can't out-vaccinate, you can't out-surgerize, out-procedurize, you can't out-supplement a lifestyle. So if you're metabolically healthy, that's clearly the most important thing for you. Matthew Yates, what is the new drug? Well, it doesn't have a name yet. It's that CD whatever number. It's still in a number phase. Just got on here. Thanks for sharing and thanks for joining. And it'll be posted. You can see the whole thing afterwards if you want. I always auto like Dr. Brewer. Thank you so much, TD. I appreciate that. Kitty Witty, Suramine. That one went right over my head. Furious Doe, what about yesterday? That one also went right over my head. B12, what's the best? I'd get methylcobalamin, not cyanocobalamin. I think that's what you're asking. Methylcobalamin, you put it under your tongue as opposed to swallowing it, or you inject it. Fort Worth West Side, your background seems a little bit more washed out from a lot of white light. Let me share with you what, that's, anyway, that's a green screen. Technology, studios are always a hassle. Fort Worth, okay, so, okay, thanks. Furious Doe, thanks. And thank you guys. We went a little bit longer than I expected to. I was hoping to take my son out to lunch. I'm not sure if he's going to be available at this point. Matt Aarons, I also want to say I'm getting a lot out of your videos and appreciate you sharing your wisdom. Helpful. Thank you so much, Matt. And please share it. Please share it on your, put it on your not your YouTube, put it on your Facebook and your Twitter and all of that. When people come in from other social media, that really makes a big deal to the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for your interest.